Hi everyone, it's Nicco here, Game on Oz's Final Fantasy XIV Online fanatic. During the last couple of months, I've covered the lead up to patch 5.3, which has delivered new main scenario content for the Shadowbringers expansion, as well as new endgame instances, like the latest chapter in the Nier Automata inspired 24-man raid. Now obviously, this awesome content isn't available to players straight away, but if you're interested in playing Final Fantasy XIV Online, this is the sort of content you can expect. Patch 5.3 has also streamlined the story content for Final Fantasy XIV Online's base game, A Realm Reborn, meaning you'll be able to jump into newer content quicker. Oh, and A Realm Reborn and the first expansion, Heaven's Ward, are now free to play, giving you plenty of reason to try before you buy. If this is all still tickling your fancy, here's a quick guide on how to get started on your journey and what you should do in Final Fantasy XIV Online. Like any other MMO, there are multiple races to choose from. The newest expansion, Shadowbringers, brought with it 2 new gender-specific races, bringing the total to 8. But unless you own the expansion already, you'll only have access to the other 6 races. Classes aren't race-specific either, like other MMOs. Sub-races sometimes come with minor stat differences, but it honestly doesn't matter as there's no best class and race combination. Due to expansion restrictions, there are also certain classes that require purchase of expansions as well as progression in the main scenario. In Final Fantasy XIV Online, classes go on to become jobs. Back in the early years, this required you to level the main class you picked along with a subclass. For example, gladiators would go on to becoming paladins, but they would also need to level up the Conjurer class to at least level 15. However, they got rid of this concept a few years later, requiring you only to level up a single class. If you're interested in tanking, the gladiator/paladin class is probably the easiest to begin with, and with the changes they made to the job over the years, I'm jealous they didn't make them earlier since they made getting into tanking much easier. If healing is more your thing, Conjurer/White Mage is the easiest to pick up. White Mage has a lot of regen heals which are perfect for beginner healers. While organising content for this video, I created an alt character mating the healer class, Scholar. These are super easy to heal with early on as you have a fairy companion to help you out. However, Arcanists/Scholars are more of a shield and mitigation focused healer, and as you progress, the fairy won't always be able to save your group as easily. There's a wide range of DPS classes as well, but an easy yet fun class to pick up is Archer/Bard. Now that you've picked your class, it's time to enter the world of Eorzea. Unless you're like me who enjoys doing all of the side quests, I'd ignore them if you're wanting to speed level while quickly progressing through the story. Since the main story in A Realm Reborn has been streamlined, you'll see yourself reaching that particular scenario's max level of 50 around the level 46 range of the story. This is a big leap in comparison to what it was previously like to progress back in the day. During my first run in Final Fantasy XIV's heyday, I was doing all the main scenario quests I could as well as side quests, yet it left me in a quest gap around the mid-40s. There are a couple of memorable side quests on offer, but you honestly won't need them early on. The only side quests that should be focused on are those for crafting purposes, enabling mount riding, and unlocking optional dungeons. If your ears pricked up at the mention of crafting, pay attention. Crafting and gathering are a little different in Final Fantasy XIV. For example, if you're a paladin, you don't just choose to be a miner and an armorer. The crafting system is a lot more in depth than that, and here's why. Crafting materials are so versatile across crafting classes. If you don't want to spend money to make money, you'll find yourself going down a crafting rabbit hole leveling all of the crafters and gatherers at the same time. Yes, I found myself also doing this again while leveling through the story. If it's for the sake of crafting your own gear, I'd wait until you reach endgame as you'll find yourself achieving better gear faster this way. If it's to make a quick buck, go right ahead. However, you'll find yourself making enough money through quests to not even worry about going broke. Oh, and crafting and gathering isn't just hitting a button and boom, you've got yourself a pair of pants and a piece of ore. There's a whole process to it and eventually a whole skill set and rotation to master. While we're at it, you also might want to join a guild, or as we like to call them, free companies. I'm honestly very picky with free companies or any guilds for that matter, but since this alt might end up left in the dark for me to forget about, I'm so sorry, Grungy. The FC that recruited me after sending out a random invite will suffice. Some FCs are friendly, some not so warming. Others are casual and some include hardcore raiders. No matter your playstyle, there's always going to be an FC that will hopefully help you out as a new player. Reaching level 50 and finishing the main scenario not only means you can go on to the first expansion, Heavensward, but you also get your first taste of endgame content. Since the level 50 content is quite old, there aren't many groups running high tier raids or primal fights. Hold up. I forgot to tell you what primal fights are. Sorry. Primal fights are like a big boss fight without the dungeon part. These are usually ran in Final Fantasy XIV Online as a way of obtaining weapons and mounts. Now that's sorted. Experiencing the more challenging endgame content these days at level 50 isn't the same as when it was fresh content. That's due to max level now being 80, meaning a lot of older raid content is being run unsynced. You can have FC members run you through it to get your clears, but again, they'll probably just run it under level to have it done quicker. However, that's not to say you shouldn't experience it for yourself. Binding Coil, Second Coil, and Final Coil of Bahamut were the first ever raid encounters in Final Fantasy XIV Online. These were directly connected to the story of what happened to Final Fantasy XIV Online between 1.0 and 2.0. In my opinion, this was the best story arc to come from a Final Fantasy XIV Online raid. It also included some of the coolest looking gear to date. If you were never a hardcore raider, I suggest sticking with the larger yet easier 24-man raids. The level 50 24-mans have become a requirement since the Shadowbringers expansion for some spoiler-filled reasons. This means a lot more people will still be running this once dead line of content. Now, primal fights didn't come with an epic story arc, but they're the cheapest and possibly the least grindy way of obtaining mounts, and with the right group of people, it can be a fun farming sesh as well. I should also point out that mounts only drop in extreme mode primal fights, meaning you will have quite the challenge ahead of you. Whether or not you choose to clear this endgame content now or continue on with the main scenario is up to you. While it can be cutscene intense, the story is actually worth paying attention to. As previously mentioned, the latest expansion scenario ties in with earlier lore, which, if ignored, will make you want to go back and revisit. But if you're more about the action than the lore, there's plenty more endgame content to challenge you at the end of each expansion. But hopefully with this short video, I may have convinced you to give Final Fantasy XIV a try. Keep an eye out for more Final Fantasy XIV Online content in the future, and thank you so much for watching.